What was the most important lesson that you learned from Steve Jobs about mindset in business?
I think it is to have a strong conviction of what you're trying to do. You don't know if it's gonna work, and I can tell you that the fear of failing is in every entrepreneur I meet, and I would even argue it was in Steve Jobs. Now, of course, he wouldn't say that or wouldn't show it. Um, and the stakes are very high because you're Apple and you're billions and billions of dollars, and you have an iconic brand. So the pressure to success is even higher. But I think what was remarkable about Steve is that he had very strong convictions of what product to build and what to do.
Well, I think that in business, especially because you don't know if it's going to work and there's a lot of testing, that you have to be willing to be flexible. So often companies grow and maybe some are growing faster than they may have been prepared for or whatnot, and they promote people into leadership roles and they kind of get left behind because they're not being trained on how to really truly be a leader. Hey there, it's Sandy Scarlatta. Get ready to dive deep into incredible stories of people who've taken life's challenges and turned them into a roadmap to happiness. On this show, we're not just talking about overcoming obstacles. We're uncovering the real, gritty secrets to living a life filled with peace, joy, and genuine happiness. This is Happiness Solved. So let's get started, because happiness is a choice and the choice is yours. Hello, Philippe Bouissou. Thank you so much for being here today. And I just said Philip and thought, okay, is it Philippe?
It's Philippe, yeah, whatever.
Philippe, I was so worried about pronouncing your last name that I forgot about your first name. All right. But you do go by Philippe, or do you go by Phil, or
I
like
go by Philippe, yeah. And when
Philippe?
I order a Starbucks, they ask me for my name. I used to say Philippe, and it's like, how many P's, how many L's, how many E's? So now I do it differently. I said Bond, Bond, and they start to write, and I said James Bond. And of course, they get a kick out of that.
Yeah, right.
And I have the
And if
last
they're
name.
writing it on the Starbucks cup, does it really matter how many L's or P's are on
Uh,
it?
it doesn't-
Well, I spell my name with two E's, and people will be like, is that with a Y or an I? And I'm
right.
like, oh,
There's no Y and there's no I. It's too easy.
spell it however you want. It doesn't matter. All right. Now that we got all that out of the way, I'm so excited to have you here today because for the audience, Philippe has a book out that is called, now I'm losing it. I'm losing the title.
It's
Where'd it
called
go?
aligning the dots.
Thank you. Thank you. Aligning the dots. And I love this because you did work under Steve Jobs.
Hmm.
And a lot of us in the personal development space, we will use that quote over and over and over. You know, his famous quote, which it's been broken up and rewritten many times, but the essence of it is you can, you can only look at your life by connecting the dots, looking backward, not
Right.
connecting and looking forward.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And I love that because, as we age, and I just had a birthday a few days ago,
Happy
you
birthday.
really do. Thank you. You really do. You can I look at my life and I'm like, wow. Right. And you start connecting those dots and you can see the synchronicities. You can see the roadblocks. You can see all of it. But then all of a sudden your life starts to make a little bit of sense. That's how I perceive it anyway.
Hmm.
What is your take on that?
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I think it's hard to, you're so much in the groove, you don't really see the sky, and it's only when you look back and you step out of, your daily things that you can connect the dots and you see, the alignment that was the arc of your life, and I think that's a really interesting way to look at it.
Yeah. So you've now created a company called Blue Dots, and you've worked with a lot of incredible companies. And what you do is you help businesses grow, and you can help them scale. And I was just looking at your website, which I love the homepage, by the way. That's
Thank you.
really, really cool. And it wouldn't let me scroll down. Like, I loved how it kept you captivated just by a
Yeah.
very simple image. And I wanted to scroll down and I couldn't. And I was like, oh, this is intentional. I love this. right? Really, really brilliant. So, talk a little bit about what you do today. And I'd love to know how you got here because going from scaling Apple's e-commerce business from zero to $350 million under Steve Jobs is quite an incredible feat in and of itself. But now you're into management consulting. That can be a big switch, but sometimes it seems to make sense. But how did you get here?
Well, I've been involved with many companies over 3 decades here in Silicon Valley, and I've been on the board of 23 companies. I've looked at 2,000 companies as a venture capitalist to kind of evaluate them and decide whether we should invest or not. So I've seen a lot of different ideas, different entrepreneurs, different approaches to creating a business. But I do think that the most vexing challenge that any entrepreneur and CEO and business leader is facing is, what do I need to do on Monday morning at 8 o'clock to grow my business? And it's a very simple and deceptively simple, I would say, question. And it's a little bit akin to saying, what do I need to do on Monday morning at 8 o'clock to be a good parent? And it's like you don't really even know where to start, how to answer that question. And the analogy with parenting is actually pretty strong because they are not, there is not a parenting school, right? You don't get a diploma to become a good parent.
Right.
There are thousands of books about parenting, which means nobody knows how to do it. And even when you start to have kids, you realize that the way you parented your first child may not be appropriate or maybe not be the right approach for the second child. So even within the family, there is no formula per se, and you have to figure it out. And I think of the challenge of growth in a very similar way. It is like parenting because every company is different, every product is different, every competitive landscape is different, and every market, and it's all dynamic and changing. And so a few years ago, I set on this journey to try to find a very very powerful way to solve that problem. And I found it, and it took me, and it's very simple, but at the same time, it took me like 25 years to figure it out. And one thing I learned at Apple is that, simplicity is really, really, really hard. And that's what Apple is all about, is simplifying everything. But I'm happy I found it. And then we've been, at Blue Dots, we help company grow faster. We've done, close to 200 engagements. And now we refine it, and we know it works really well. And it doesn't work well because we are smart. It works well because it's very common sense.
So you're using common sense, and I love that. And I wrote down simplicity or simplifying is hard.
Mm-hmm.
Is it hard when you have a good process in place? Or is it hard for lack of that process, right? Because when you think about it, everything we do, right, we have a system for it, right? When we brush our teeth, and right, you have an order in which you do it. And if that process is good, right, it's easy.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah,
Or am I off base?
no, it makes total sense. You're 100% right.
Yeah.
But the issue is that if I'm a dentist and I tell you how to brush your teeth, that methodology is very clear. Pretty much every dentist on this planet will tell you, you need to floss and you need to do this, you need to do that. The problem is that for the challenge of growth, there is no process. You have to engineer the process specifically to the company's
Right.
products, to the service, to the market, to the competitive, to the pricing, to everything, to the talent, to the DNA. And because of that, and again, it's exactly like parenting. I cannot tell you the process or the recipe to become a good parent because it depends on so many things. And that's why it's hard. So it is the lack of process that makes it really, really hard.
Right. And you have to tailor it to that business because every business is going to be different.
Absolutely.
Right. Right. Okay. Because this is a happiness podcast and I talk about mindset and all of that. What was the most important lesson that you learned from Steve Jobs about mindset in business?
I think it is to have a strong conviction of what you're trying to do. You don't know if it's going to work. And I can tell you that the fear of failing is in every entrepreneur I meet. And I would even argue it was in Steve Jobs. Now, of course, he wouldn't say that or wouldn't show it. Um, and the stakes are very high because you're Apple and you're billions and billions of dollars, and you have an iconic brand. So the pressure to success is even higher. But I think what was remarkable about Steve is that he had very strong convictions of what product to build and what to do, and they, everybody could rally. He had a very clear vision. He knew where to go, and it's like you either believe in it and you would rally around him, or you didn't, and then you wouldn't belong to Apple. It's very simple. So his tenacity in this vision. Now, having said that, I have seen him on several occasions to change his mind. So I would come to him and say something, and he would tell me I'm the stupidest guy on the planet, which is fine. I can take that. But then, like 3 weeks later, he would actually do exactly what I told him. Now, of course, he would never recognize that, which is fine. But he also had this ability to change his mind and to change his view. He wasn't stuck in his vision. He was listening to a lot of people, distilling all that stuff, and then making a decision. So he had a conviction, but the conviction was not pure intuition, although intuition was a big part of it, but it was also the feedback of talking to many, many people and listening to the market and what companies were doing. So I think that's probably, the strongest trait that he had, and one of the reasons that he was so successful.
Well, I think that in business, especially because you don't know if it's going to work and there's a lot of testing, that
Yeah.
you have to be willing to be flexible. And that's also, I believe, because I work with a lot of leadership, that's part of being a good leader is
Absolutely.
recognizing, okay, let's take a look at this before we're too far down the road. And
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, and not
Yeah.
not accepting the status quo and being able to change and pivot. In fact, I would argue that most successful companies, especially VC or private equity backed companies, pivoted at least once, if not several times, before they met success. And in
Yeah.
fact, if you were to read their original business plan and you look at them today, that connection would be extremely hard to make.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
so
businesses,
you have to be able to do that.
right. And businesses do need to take a look at their, what they're doing on an annual basis anyway, and kind of,
Yeah. And the
make those
market, the
shifts.
market, the reality is the markets are changing all the time. So it's like
Oh, yeah.
what you were doing 2 years ago was very relevant, but now with AI, you have to rethink your
Right.
complete technology stack, and you have no choice. And if you don't, you're not going to be successful anymore.
Right.
So they have
Right.
to.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's this fine balance between setting a direction and pursuing it, um, and be able to adapt and change because of market conditions or whatever reasons. And that's a very tricky balancing act, because if you are too much in one of those two extremes, then it's very hard to be successful. So it's
Yeah.
tricky.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So you pioneered this, you call it a revolutionary methodology called A4 precision alignment. That's lighting the fires of faster, sustainable revenue growth across the business world. And you talked about that in your TEDx talk, which is entitled The Secret to Grow Any Business. And you've received over 1 million views. That's pretty remarkable. Congratulations. That's
Thank you.
awesome.
Thank you.
Can you go into that a little bit deeper?
Yeah, so I think the first insight I had a few years ago was that the reason companies don't grow as fast as they can within their market is because somewhere there is a misalignment between the business and the target market. And the word target is important because you want to go after the very specific market that will resonate with your products and services. Um, so that was kind of the first insight. And then I went to the next step, which says, what does it mean really to be aligned with my target market? And then I had a second big insight, which was I realized that there are four universal axes of alignment between any business and its target market. And the remarkable thing is that those four alignments, are absolutely universal. So I can take a cafe on the left bank of Paris, La Coupole, which is the famous cafe where Sartre used to go, or I could take Tesla or your business, Sandy, or I can take, Bank of America, any business. They are all subject to the exact same forces of alignment. And let me tell you very quickly what they are so that your audience can understand. The first one is that the pain that the customer has and the claim that the business makes to address that pain have to be aligned. So imagine you come to me with a headache and I give you a stomachache pill. Well, obviously you're not going to buy my pill because your pain is your head and my claim is your fixing your stomach.
Right.
So that's the first alignment. The second one is that the perception, which is the understanding of the claim, and the message, which is how the claim is expressed, those two things have to be aligned. So imagine I have the right pill for your headache and I describe it to you in Korean. I'm assuming you don't speak Korean. You will never buy the pill, even though it's the perfect product, because you're like, what the heck is this guy talking about? I don't understand anything.
So that's like the messaging.
It's the messaging, which is the message by definition is how you express your claim. And then the perception is how that claim is understood by the prospect.
Or how it's understood, right? Right.
The third one is the way customers want to buy and the way the product is sold in the marketplace have to be aligned. So if I have the right pill for your headache and I say, Sandy, you have to fly to the Bay Area to get it, you can say, wait a minute, I'm in Vienna, I'm close to Vienna, Virginia, why can't I just drive there and go to a pharmacy to get the pill? So you want to have no friction or as little friction as possible in the acquisition process, which is the process by which once you decided to buy the product, you acquire that product. That's the third axis. And then the fourth axis is my favorite one because I actually stole it out of the Apple playbook. So as you say, I spent some time, I worked for Steve Jobs. And by the way, Sandy, I'm wondering if you ever wonder how I lost my hair, but now you know.
Yes. Working for Steve Jobs, you lost your hair. Okay.
But I learned many insightful lessons from Steve, but there's one of them that really struck me in particular. And that lesson became the foundation of the fourth axis of alignment. I realized working at Apple and working for Steve that there is one and only one business on this planet. What I realized that everybody is in the exact same business. So there are not hundreds of thousands or millions of businesses on this planet. There is only one. So your business, my business, everybody else is in the same business. And that unique business is the manufacturing and delivery of delight.
Oh.
So you and I and everybody else is in the exact same business. We have to manufacture and we have to deliver delight. And so the last axis of alignment is that the expected delight after I decided to buy a product and just I acquired that product and what is actually delivered to me, those two things must be aligned. So imagine you finally get the pill for your headache and then you take it and after 20 minutes you have a rush and you feel dizzy and your headache is still there. Obviously, that's not the delight you expected. What you expected is, okay, I take the pill, I wait 20 minutes, and then I go on with my routine, my daily routine, and my life. So that's the fourth axis of alignment. So if you want to grow your business, there's only one way. I actually don't know any other way. You have to align your business as much as possible with your target market. And so that means that the claim you're making to your prospect is the same as their pain. It means that the messaging, which is how you explain, what your claim is, has to be aligned with how they understand it. It means the way you sell your product is aligned with the way they want to buy your product. And then finally, it means that what you deliver to them is aligned with the expected delight. And I argue really strongly that if you align your business along those four dimensions, then you will grow as much as possible within your target market. And that's really the big insight. And that's the foundation of everything we do here at Plutos to help company grow.
I love it. And when you think about it, as I hold my late iPhone 15, I've been been using this iPhones for, I met my husband in 2012. I was using a BlackBerry at the time.
Right.
And he immediately was like, get rid of the BlackBerry, you're getting an iPhone. I was like, okay. And every year he gets me a new iPhone. And, even though I don't need it, I get one every year. And
I think like it's either the BlackBerry or me, you have to pick.
Right. He literally was like, I am not dating somebody with a BlackBerry. But yeah, the products, you're not going to get those repeat customers, and you're not going to scale if those your four axis of alignment. I like that. I like that because when you think of an axis, right, you're thinking everything is straight. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. It's interesting because we've been talking about business this whole time, Philippe, but everything we've talked about goes right back to mindset,
Mhm.
right? We need you need the process. You can have a process for when that fear comes up, right? For the entrepreneurs out there, when you've got that fear of failure, there's a process that you can have to help you to make that shift.
Yeah.
Being in alignment. I mean, all of this stuff. I love it. I always just try to find a way to make the conversation about mindset.
Well, I mean, mindset is everything, right? Because if you have the
Yeah.
wrong mindset, you cannot align. And to be honest, there is actually a fifth axis of alignment. So it's really four plus one. The four I described is the alignment between the business and the market. So it's kind of the market-facing alignment, if you will. But the fifth axis of alignment, which is actually the last chapter of my book, is all about the internal alignment. And you talk about mindset. If you don't align all those mindsets of all those people within the company, then the execution of the external alignment will fail, and the company is not going to grow. So it is a very fundamental alignment as well, which is the internal alignment, that is critical to the success of the execution of the four market-facing alignments.
And don't you think that starts at the very top?
I don't actually.
You
I,
don't?
I,
Okay. No, I'd love to
sorry,
hear your
I,
thoughts on that.
I
Yeah.
think I think I misunderstood your question. You mean by the very top? You mean by the CEO? CEO down the other leadership?
Yeah, like the leadership, maybe not the CEO. I think that's a lot of pressure to put on one person, but if you have a management team, the
Yeah,
C-suite,
yeah,
the culture, the mindset, the consciousness of the
yeah.
company.
For sure. Yeah. The reason I said no is because I misunderstood your question. I thought your
Oh, okay.
question was, do you start with the internal alignment before the external alignment? Is that comes on the top? And the answer is no. But to answer your question, yes, the leadership sets the tone and the pace and the culture and the DNA. Um, and then it percolates top down because, you lead by example. And if you do the right thing, then people below will do the right thing as well. And then people below them will do the right thing. So absolutely, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I love talking about that conversation because I feel like today, so often companies grow and maybe some are growing faster than they may have been prepared for or whatnot. And they promote people into leadership roles and they kind of get left behind because they're not being
They're not ready.
trained
Yeah.
on how to really, truly be a leader.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think that especially here in Silicon Valley, where the pressure to grow because you raise venture capital money or private equity money is tremendous. Like I gave you a lot of money as an investor, therefore you have to grow. And
That's right.
and I talk about in my book. I talk about growing is like drinking wine. It has to be done responsibly. And too
Yes.
much growth kills company because they cut corners. They don't train those leadership, those new leaders, as you were saying, um, and they are also blinded by their success. They think they got everything right. They understand everything, and they don't. And then when it crashes, it's really really painful. And it's like building a nice building from the outside, and the foundation is cracked, and then one day you don't understand why the building just collapses. Um, so I think the pace of growth and the sensitivity and the thoughtfulness at which you have to grow a business is really critical. And some market allows for high growth and others don't. But there's very, very few companies that have the right context to grow really fast, like a blitzscaling, for example, the book that Chris Ye and Reid Hoffman wrote. I think it's a wonderful book, but it applies to 0.0001% of the businesses. There's very few business that can become a category leader and take it all. Most businesses, cannot grow at that pace, and if they do, then they will not be successful.
Well, and I just know from my own personal experience, I started an IT recruiting company back in 1998
Mhm.
and took it to seven figures pretty quickly. I even started, Philippe, I started this IT support services, and it was before Geek Squad came out. Okay. Right. And that's what I had one guy, and he would travel around to different little companies and help them with their computers and stuff like that. And then I'm sure you remember, I'm on the East Coast, Silicon Valley, right, with all the data centers and AOL, and we used to have all the telecom companies here and everything. And in
Yeah,
March of 2001, everything blew up. And because I had grown a little too fast, right? Hindsight's 2020, I wasn't prepared for a catastrophic market
right.
crash like we had. And eventually, sold whatever little assets I had and just walked away pretty much. But that's part of it too, is because there's so many unknowns out there. And if you're scaling too fast and you don't have those systems or finances in
Right.
place to prepare you.
Right. I met with the CEO last week. He grew the business from zero. He was a founder from zero to $50 million very quickly. It was doubling every year. And he said, "I want to meet with you." And he's a great guy, a great entrepreneur. And I met with him, and he said, "The company is gone." I said, "What do you mean gone?" I said, we're the company has shut down, and we're selling off the assets, but nobody's going to make any money." And I said, "Why?" And he says, "Because we grew too fast. We burned too much cash. We grew too fast. There was too much pressure from the investors. And I started to miss sales, to miss the plan. And then the investors just freaked out, and no new investors wanted to come, and we shut down the company." So it was a $50 million business.
Wow.
And that's a really good example of just growing too fast. We should have taken his time and get to cash flow positive or cash flow neutral, uh, you know, become independent of investors, and maybe it takes 10 years instead of 5, but so what?
Yeah. Well, because it is a long game whenever you start
Oh,
a
for sure.
business.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure.
It
So
takes
what,
sorry, I was going
go
to
ahead.
say, I compare the life of a business by multiplying their age by 3. So if you think about going public after 7 years or 8 years, you're 20 or 21. Well, you can drive and you can drink wine. It's kind of, you're still a young adult. Um, and that has worked pretty well. So it is a game of patience, it's a game of thoughtfulness. And if you do that, you build an unbelievable, valuable businesses. And if you don't, you just burn bridges and you end up nowhere. And it's a big disappointment for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. So Philippe, what is next for you? Anything else that you want to talk about that I haven't, brought up today?
I try. So I run Budos. I manage the company, which keeps us really busy, and it's great. I really enjoy it. I have a strong passion for helping those CEOs grow. It's so hard to be a CEO, and I know because I've been a CEO. Um, People say, "Well, it's like being on a roller coaster," and I used to say, "Yes, but you're in the dark. You don't even see the rails." But now I have a much better way to say it. I say, "Yeah, it's like being on a roller coaster, but with a lot more angst than amusement." And I
Yes.
think that really says it all. So apart from running Budos, I am on 2 boards of companies. I do want to help some startups and some young companies because I've been so blessed and grateful for what I had, and having met mentors and people who helped me. And I kind of want to give back. And so I am involved with 2 small companies that are trying to solve really big problems, very, very difficult problems technically. But if they do, I think they can make a difference in the world, and I'm passionate and trying to help them be successful.
Oh, I love that you're doing that and helping other, yeah, small businesses.
And
That's
then
great.
the other thing I would say is that I love to learn, and so I never want to stop learning. I think it's the key to live a happy life, and I'm learning how to serve better in tennis. Although I've been playing for 20 years and I still don't really know how to serve well. I'm relearning how to play drums. I learned skydiving for 10 years or 15 years. And I'm always really interested in, and of course I have an interest in physics, which is my PhD. So I'm always very curious about things, and I'm trying to understand how things work. And I can go pretty deep. I mean, not super deep, from a technical standpoint, but deep enough to get a good sense of how things work. And I really enjoy that. And I would encourage anybody to never stop learning. People say, oh, I'm too old to play music. It's like, no, you can start playing music at 70 years old. There's just no rule that says you cannot learn. And you can start playing pickleball at any age, and you can start, going and climbing mountains if that's what you want. There's really no limit. It's just like we put our own constraints in our minds, and it's like, why? Just if you want to do something, just do it. Just go for it.
Absolutely. And I didn't know that you played tennis. And if you have your PhD in physics,
Mhm.
haven't you figured out the serve yet? Because I know last night when I played, I double faulted more times than I had.
I have a very good understanding of the physics of the serve, but to translate that into the actual motions, there's a big gap there. I'm getting there, so like I'm not horribly bad, but it's like it's a very tricky move, very complicated move, and I'm amazed that I'm still learning about it. I've been playing tennis for a long time. There's always something to
Yeah.
learn.
Yeah. I've only been playing tennis about 10 years, but
Oh,
I'm
that's fun.
so overly confident in my athletic abilities. And last night, I have a coach here that will
Mhm.
put four people together. So it's kind of like a semi private, but we're doing great drills. And so you're playing with other people. I love it. Well, I
Yeah,
get there and it's three teenagers, and I'm going, really? But I tell you what, there was at one point I didn't get the ball, and she's like, why didn't that was yours? Why didn't you get it? I'm like, she can get it. She's 40 years younger than me. I'm like, literally,
yeah,
I'm 59 years young, and I was playing with teenagers, but I was holding my own and I was getting balls that
yeah.
they couldn't even get, right? So age is
Yeah.
just a number.
But it helps because you probably have a better sense of the geometry of the court. You probably have better strategy. You probably have a better technique. Yeah, they're athletic. They can run fast, but if you do the right drop shot, it's gonna, and then they may get it, but then they're in trouble on the next point. So it's like that's fine. You just have to be a bit more patient. But it's a great sport. It's very
Isn't it
technical.
great?
Talk about mindset and the mind. I mean, that is so critical the way you think.
And I work with elite athletes. I'm a retired US national and international figure skating coach. And I get out there and I ought to know better, right? In between points. And I still sit there and I turn my back to the rest of the players and I walk over and I'm like, okay, and it is so hard.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course.
And I think that's why I love it so much because and I watch a lot of tennis too. And I watch the professionals and I can see them trying to make that shift
Yeah,
because for
yeah,
them, it's,
yeah.
a lot on the line for those folks.
Did you watch the Shanghai final with Djokovic and Sinner? It was really
I
good.
did see it. I did. What do you think about that? I don't know. I kind of feel like there's sometimes it's hard to read Djokovic because I watch him, I try to watch him almost every time he plays because I really do believe that he's going to go down as the greatest athlete of all time because,
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, his
yeah,
athleticism is amazing. His
yeah,
mindset is amazing. His ethics in working is amazing. It's interesting. For a long time, I didn't really like the person, and I didn't really know
yes,
why. And then one
yep,
day I realized that he actually has a lot of humor, and
hmm
and he's kind of a funny guy in a way. And but I really enjoy. I mean, he plays so well, and he's good at everything, and he's so athletic.
yeah,
But I feel like the next generation, the Sinners and the Alcaraz, are playing differently. They have different way of playing. I kind of feel there's a gap. Um, but I think Djokovic will play maybe a couple more years. I don't know, and then retire. But he's
yeah.
still. I mean, he's way up there for sure.
I
He's not
know.
he's not losing his
But
ability.
when the match you're talking about in Shanghai with
It was
Alcaraz
close.
and
It
Sinner,
was very close.
very, very close.
Yeah,
And I think there were times you could see the look on Djokovic's face, and he was just couldn't in amazement because Sinner is so
yeah,
phenomenal.
yeah.
And
Well,
I think he
especially
was like, holy
um,
moly.
yeah. I think
Yeah,
that's the best wine on the planet for sure. It's amazing.
yeah, it
But
really
I went,
is.
I went to the U.S. Open a few weeks ago, a few months ago, and I watched the women play, and they are playing so fast now. I was just
Yes.
really impressed. And it's amazing, amazing the level that those women play now compared to even 10 years ago.
Oh, it really is. It really is. And a couple of weeks ago, I went to our local tennis facility, and they have like cardio tennis, and there was a woman playing with me, and I couldn't believe how hard she was hitting the ball. And I said, "How long have you been playing?" And she goes, "Since I was 6." And I go, "What?" Because we're all, it's adults mostly. She goes, "Oh, well, I haven't played for 6 years, but when I was a teenager, I played for Russia on the junior tour." And I'm telling you, you can tell there's no comparison
Yeah, for
for
sure.
someone that's been playing their whole
Another
life
world.
as to
Another
me
world.
that picked up tennis at the age of 50, right?
Yeah.
So
But it's great. It's great you're doing it, and it's an amazing sport.
it is. All right. Well, didn't expect to have a conversation about tennis today, folks, but hey, my audience knows that I will talk about tennis all day long. All right, Philippe. Such an amazing conversation. Folks, check out his book, check out his company. Everything will be in the show notes. And I wish you all the best. And thank you for how you've contributed to the world and to Apple as well,
Well, thank
right?
you so much, Andy. Thank you so much for having me on your show. It's a great show, and I really enjoyed our conversation. And looking forward to staying in touch. But thank you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye.